But yeah, they're definitely, I mean, we built our entire channel. What we do have on collaboration, including those players. That is our entire community. People who watch us all.
Quit talking. Just like this a lot.
Yes. I don't know. I consider
Torment has a really good post-mortem as well.
Just hang on one sec. Converse. You can talk with these guys if you want. It's going to be a real cool, casual kind of panel. There will be lots of time for Q&A at the end too, so I'll talk to you in a little bit.
My name's Will Blanton. I co-founded RVA Game Jams with my friend Momin Khan.
So I was just wondering, what would you say the panel was about?
So I wanted to kind of explore some ideas as a developer. You know, like I said, I learned a lot of other skills before I learned how to program. You know, learn how to do art. You know, learn how to do music. Learn how to do programming. And then I thought, like, oh, now I'm done. Right now I can make a game. But there's so much more that goes into releasing a game. Right? You have to contact so many people, and during the panel, Momin and his team are like really great at handling press and like wrangling press, but it's something that's like totally alien to me. And so like I sort of have an insider view on how developers and press coexist, but at the same time it's still totally alien to me. So I kind of wanted to explore a few things, like how we do coexist and how we communicate with each other, and how to maybe understand the different facets of it better to facilitate better communication, I guess.
Shit. I guess she's found her archetype.
She's such a good seamstress, like her costume. Well, it's called Video Games and the Media. So it was about the way that video games are written about or talked about in media, in mainstream media, and I guess more specialized media. Like we talked about Let's Players a lot, and traditional media, how they discuss games. Honestly, I didn't know why they chose me, because I was up there with Momin and Mike, who were like actual indie game devs, and they have games on the market, and I don't. And the IRL guys, they have their channel up there, and Chris, of course. So I wasn't sure why I was picked, but I guess I am an indie game dev in a way. But basically, I've just been around RVA Game Jams crew so long that Will and Lauren, the founders, they just thought I'd be a good fit, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and Ruthie, you know, I don't think she's really focused a lot of effort on getting press attention for her games, but her games are like noteworthy, and the press has like taken note of her games. So I wanted her on the panel as well because she kind of has. I feel like she has a similar perspective on it that I do, but maybe a different viewpoint, or maybe the same viewpoint but a different perspective. You know, because I can't assume that she feels the same way that I do about the press and the media. You know, I don't think, you know, I've been staying up late at night, like pulling my hair out about it. I don't think she worries about it like I do. But I wanted somebody on the panel also that is more kind of like maybe focused on just making games for the sake of making games. Like Momin's team, they make great games, and they always make games that they want to make, but they also have that foresight of like who's their audience and how can we get press to be interested in this. And so I feel like I wanted a kind of two different sides of the same kind of coin.
Okay, so right from the get-go, tell us your name and your project.
So my name's Joe. I work with Nick on Instant Replay Live or Let's Play. We do just sit down, play the game for 10 minutes, and comment over it. And if people like it, that's cool.
And okay, so how did they first contact you? The RVA Game Jams group.
That's a question for Nick. Unfortunately, I have no idea. Nick's the manager.
Yeah.
Right on.
I'm just the pretty face.
I'm Nick, and I am half of Instant Replay Live with my brother Joe. We had been aware of RVA Game Jams. It was just something I had found when I was sort of researching what's in the area, who I might connect with, and things like that. So I actually joined their Facebook group in probably the first month we were doing Instant Replay Live. But I had unfortunately not been able to line up a time to go to one of their events until now, just because of bad, whatever scenarios. But because I've been in contact with them and sort of commenting on their Let's Play, their game development and things like that, Lauren V, who runs the Facebook page and sort of their social media side, with her partner Will Blanton, she reached out and she said, "Hey, we're doing this Ludum Dare or Dare game jam, and we've got a lot of RVA people in it. Would you guys like to maybe do an episode featuring some of them?" And what was funny is we totally were already planning that, but after the fact, no one knows that, of course. But she asked us to do it, and it was super cool. I actually said, "Yeah, do you have like a good way of condensing who's in it and which ones maybe we could check out?" So she gave me a list of about 10 games, and I went through and I played them all, and then we made our episode of our top 5 because we had to keep it tight a little bit. And after that, she reached out again. I guess she liked it, and so she said, "Hey, would you like to be on this panel?" And I said, "Why?" Because we don't really have a lot of expertise. We're just enthusiasts. But we agreed, and we came out, and it was a great time.
I didn't realize it was going to be about journalism as much as it was, which is an interesting angle because as a Let's Player, we are introducing a lot of people to new games, and it's interesting that journalism has such a multifaceted department in gaming. There's of course straightforward reviews. There's people playing the games. There's just the general buzz of people talking about them. And there's so many ways that it comes across. So it's a really interesting kind of through line for that panel is the theme of journalism.
Yeah, all right. I'll get started by just letting you guys know. I'm Will Blanton. I am half of the founding members of RVA Game Jams, along with my partner Lauren over there. This panel will be a little discussion about video games and media, and that sounds like a very broad topic because it is. And hopefully we'll cover a fair amount of interesting bits of that topic, but you can't really cover the whole thing. So I'll start off by just saying, Will Blanton, I'm a game developer. I go by 010111 online, and I also am half of Hyperreal Games. Start with these panelists here. You can see everybody kind of. It's like a match. But we've got Route 76, we've got Momin, and we have Mike. They are indie developers working on Clash Cup Turbo. It's an awesome local multiplayer game. It'll be at MagFest coming up soon. They've also worked on a lot of other stuff and are currently working on a lot of other stuff like Night Shift Ninja. They're a really cool local studio. Two of my favorite dudes, super nice guys, super smart guys. And another thing is that they're both real, go-getters and hype men. But the best part is they're not only go-getters and hype men for themselves, but for other people. So it really helps. They're a really great pillar of the community here.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah.
Alright, next is the instant replay live guys. We've got Joe and Nick. They are YouTube Let's Players. They have a gameplay channel on YouTube featuring a slew of PC games from all genres: RPG, action, adventure, FPS, platform, RTS plus. They do a lot of cool games, and like, what's really interesting is they do a lot of games that you don't really, YouTube is kind of, with the Let's Play community on YouTube, a lot of things kind of become an echo chamber, You see one game after the other, and like, everybody's playing one game, These guys are playing a lot of interesting games. They also did some coverage of our last game jam, which was really fun. You can find them on YouTube, Instant Replay Live. Next we have Ruthie. Ruthie is another great pillar of our game jam community here. She's an animator, she's an artist, designer. She teaches, she makes comics. She is a jack of all trades, and she's mastered a lot. She's currently working at a startup called Nestiny, doing graphic design, illustration, doing cool web apps and stuff. Thanks for being here, Ruthie. I'm really glad you could be on this panel. And finally, we have Chris Suellentrop. He is a contributing video game critic for the New York Times and a host of a podcast, Shall We Play a Game, which I've kind of been binge listening to recently. Really fun. They're currently, do you have any more episodes on Fallout, or did you kind of wrap it up?
We kind of wrapped up Fallout because JJ finished, and we said, well, I'm not finished, so we're just going to move on.
Okay.
So we started The Witcher 3.
Awesome, yeah, it's really fun to listen to. He's written feature articles for the New York Times Magazine, Wired, New York Magazine, Legal Affairs, Kotaku, more. I mean, he's involved in a lot of different assets of media, so that is what kind of shaped this panel. I'm glad you could make it to this panel, as well as to Global Game Jam, which is coming up later this evening. Chris will be our keynote speaker. So, first things first, we have a couple of mics for you guys. If you kind of hold down the power button on them, they should turn on and should display a green light.
Looks like a pop symbol.
Detonation sequence.
Yeah, 5, 4, 3.
Yeah, you kind of have to share the mics, and they might be a little hot. But, all right, so I'll start off with a question, kind of one-on-one questions for the panelists, and then we'll kind of have some discussion, and then we'll be open for Q&A from the audience. First of all, Chris, you have so much experience in very traditional media as well as a lot of new media. Could you talk about how they're different from each other and how they both suit game journalism or critics or any aspect of the media that you're involved in? What's the difference between traditional media and new media, and how do they benefit games?
It's a big one.
I mean, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to answer this question, but I would say, I guess my original, my first job in the national media was at Slate Magazine. It was an online magazine. I started there in 2000. So I left graduate school in 1999. The internet was the internet's very exciting right now, but it was super exciting before the economy collapsed. And I'm just kidding, but before the dot-com crash. And I really wanted to work online. And I think some of my interest in games, I mean, I played games as a kid. I played games as an adult. But I think some of my interest in games came from my interest in interactive journalism on the internet. That thinking about what it means to do journalism in the presence of an audience, that's always there, whose movements you can measure as they travel through your site, is a fundamentally different way of thinking than just putting out a magazine. And there are things in common, but that, I think, is one thing that internet journalism and video games have in common, is the presence of a player or a participant. That it's a sort of participant experience. Podcasts are a little old-fashioned. Podcasts are so non-interactive. I mean, radio is more interactive than podcasts are. I mean, they're on demand, so they're personalized in the sense that you time shift them. So there's sort of this weird, fogey-ish media. So I don't know if that helps. If that helps answer your question. But I mean, the liveness of doing online media is part of why they have fewer editors, fewer gatekeepers, and then you also have the idea that you're in competition with all this free content, whether it's from message board posters or Twitter users or Facebook posters, or it's once upon a time, to sort of slake the urge to write, you had to go find, you either had to publish your own zine or something, or you had to find an editor. And now, I think there are people who are like, well, why would I write an article? I can just Facebook all day. And so, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's an interesting, time to watch your, watch the world work.
Right. And so with the kind of like live participatory aspect, there's a lot of legwork that you must do to keep up. Now you're not only just like putting out content, but you're also participating in a community. Is that extra work? Do you think the way things are now with like huge blogs and stuff like that, do you think that the extra work that you have to put into it to kind of keep up with things and compete with other blogs and stuff, do you think that work is it as fruitful as you'd like it to be, or is it kind of like, do you find yourself kind of worn out by it when you'd rather be just writing content?
Yeah, look, I think different people are satisfied by different kinds of work. You do see a lot of people. Blogs are over, right? But if in the blog era, you saw a lot of people experience burnout from that. Andrew Sullivan is retired. But the pace of the young people who are producing this stuff is not slowed. It's increased tremendously. Before I went to work at Slate imagined itself as a magazine and was really committed to the magazine metaphor. It even came out once a week. It came out on paper at Starbucks, Slate on paper, and you could pick it up and read it. And then someone had a conceptual breakthrough. Well, we could just publish these stories throughout the week. And people were like, oh, what an interesting idea. We could just publish every day. And then someone said, we should hold some. We used to just publish all the stuff at like 6 o'clock when we were done with it. And someone said, well, our readers are coming the next day, and they feel like this stuff is stale. And we're like, but it's just as new as the stuff that you're reading in the newspaper. It was produced yesterday. And they're like, no, but they want to feel that it was produced today. And so we would just hold it and publish some stuff in the morning. That's not quite what you're saying, but still, there's part of the reasons for that demand is that demand for instantaneity, that you want to feel that it's all now, that it's all happening now, that you're in the presence of nowness. I do think that is an obstacle to reflection and thought and reporting, and there are ways around that. Dave Weigel, who's a local writer, is sort of now at the Washington Post, but at Slate, he sort of just published a rolling reporter's notebook of what he was seeing in it, and there's a way that it's provisional. But no, it certainly can't produce a New Yorker story. You know, it's a different form, and so I don't know. You know, I think you know, I don't know what it means, but like it's, you know, once upon a time, people got sent to cover cops or cover fires or something to train to work in journalism, and now they get sent to aggregate articles or to feed the beast at BuzzFeed or Vice or Vox or Gawker or one of these other places, and that's it's a consuming job. It's a young person's job, and no, I don't think it's a job you can do forever.
Right. That's really interesting. Speaking of a lot of life work, one of the things I admire the most about Route 76 here, these guys, is that they really kind of, they're trying to allow their small studio size to allow them to flourish in interesting ways. And I always think it's fun, like, to watch you guys work, like at GDC, the Game Developers Conference, you know, while Momin and I are at these panels and different talks and stuff, Mike is like running around San Francisco, like tracing down business leads and stuff. What kind of things are you guys doing to kind of like keep up with journalism on the flip side of things?
Well, I think mostly right now, I mean, we just try to contact a lot of people through social media, and a big part of it is Twitter and Facebook for us. Less Facebook, more Twitter, because you have that instant access to people. You know, you can literally just call out anyone you want, ask them something, or they can ask you something, and that's really done a lot for us in terms of keeping contact and making contact. So I'd say that is probably our biggest outlet right now. What do you say?
Yeah, definitely Twitter. Another thing is, like, you're talking about GDC and stuff. Like, we're a small studio, right? We don't have a lot of resources, time, or money. So when we take a big trip out to California or to New York or something, we kind of get into this mode where, like, we don't want to waste any opportunity, right? So if we see someone awesome, you know, we see the head of indie development of Xbox or something, you know, like, we'll try to take the opportunity and talk to that person.
Just cold approaching.
Yeah, and it's like, the worst case scenario isn't that bad. It's like, oh, you meet someone cool, you shake hands, and then you leave. You never see them again. So that's the worst case. So it's like, whatever. And often, like, we've had really good success, so we've had good connections and stuff. I guess it's just like, you know, feeling like, you know, you spent a lot of your resources, which could be spent on the game, you spent on it to go to this place. Take advantage of it. That's, I think, the mentality that we.
And I guess I could add to that a little, just to, you know, kind of being fearless to seek out the media part of it, instead of kind of waiting for it to find you. Because, you know, we'll have so much time at the booth, and, you know, we will have people approach us, like, when we're working, we're like showing the game and say, oh man, we'd love to talk to you about the game. And there's a little bit of that, but like Mo was saying, it's just really important, you know, to get up in someone's face, say, hi, I'm making games. Do you want to talk to me? And they can say no, but they can also say yes. So.
Is like that immediacy ever, do you feel like you're, I mean, as kind of like an introverted person, I always feel like I'm pushing myself on other people. Is that and like, especially when you're in those like immediate moments where it's like, oh, that's so-and-so, like, how do you kind of like psych yourself up to do that? Because I mean, it's not easy.
So I don't know about Mike, but I'm like really introverted also. So I think it goes back to what I said. It's like the desire not to waste an opportunity is stronger than the fear of like bothering someone. So I definitely feel, I see someone who's like obviously famous, or, you know, obviously they get a lot of people talking to them, and I obviously think, oh, it would be a bother for me to go and talk to them. But then, like, I just turn that off. I try to overcome that feeling.
Right.
because most of the time, I don't know if you guys are more famous. You probably, if you have a better experience with this, but you know, even if you're famous, like if someone comes up to talk to you, it's not really a bad experience, right? Like if talking to someone nice, a fan, you know, everyone likes that, no matter how famous.
Everyone likes good compliments.
Yeah, so I think just over time, you know, we've been going to shows, and obviously it helps if you have a friend to back you up on these things. Over time, you just get used to the fact that, you know, you can talk to anyone. There's really no fear.
And I mean, honestly, like, to get myself psyched up, I just go, in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, what do I got to lose, you know? What are they going to say to me that is going to make me not want to make games? Nothing, you know? They can tell me to go away, but that's all right. But, you know, that, I don't think that's ever really happened,
No,
has it?
it's always been, that's what I'm saying.
But who is the most famous game designer? I mean, we're not talking about Britney Spears here. Like,
No.
In all seriousness, like, these people aren't being flocked.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure that people are delighted. I mean, even at something like GDC, they probably are maybe at the end of the day, maybe tired. But at the same time, like, they're probably delighted to talk to people who are interested in their work and admire their work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially at GDC. I mean, everybody's there to talk shop, you know. But I don't know, who's like the most famous-y person you've met? Because I don't think I've really met a lot.
There's this convention in New York where Jonathan Blow was at. So he's probably pretty famous.
Pretty famous. He's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, obviously some people are harder to talk to than others. John Romero is at GDC. He's really cool. It's like a lot of it. This is what's really cool about the game industry. They're just like super inviting and fun. Like, I don't know about other industries. People might be more closed off, pretentious even, but in the game industry, they're so open arms, inviting. So
There aren't many people that get into video game development to become famous.
yeah, I think
that's true too.
That's a big part of it. Like, you don't sit down and you're like, oh, I want to be rich and famous. I'm gonna spend my whole life making games. Like, no one thinks that, right? So, I think that's true. That's probably a good explanation for that.
But John Romero does have the hair of someone that's just super famous. That's my goal in life.
You're getting there.
Super famous.
You're getting there.
Yeah.
I think a couple inches in here.
You have a good silhouette, Will.
Thank you. So, Ruthie, to say that Ruthie's games have a nice, unique charm to them is like a huge understatement. Every time she makes a game on one of her events, it's like, really, like, the art's really interesting, the humor is like really there, and it's like really, it's not the kind of humor that you see in a lot of games, you know what I mean? Like, there's like a kind of established like game comedy now, but like Ruthie's games, it kind of feels like you're watching Looney Tunes sometimes, and like it's very interesting. And I wanted to ask you what's it like for you as a creator to see your game being digested in a bunch of different ways? Like, people have written about your games, these guys have played your game. What's that like? The different kind of perspectives on your games.
It's delightful to see someone play your game. Just even if they hate it, it's just so fun and entertaining. So these guys did a Let's Play of a lot of our Game Jam games a few weeks ago, and it was just so fun to hear them laughing through my game and pointing out which things they thought were funny. And there's another reviewer out there named Jupiter Hadley who she's really the one I'm trying to impress, because she, at first glance, you think, who's this teenage girl? She has like neon stars and rainbows on her site, and you're like, who is this? But she's reviewed over 10,000 games, so she's the one that really matters, because she's literally seen everything as far as Game Jam games and indie games go. So, you know, my first couple games, she sort of panned. She literally yawned during one of them and said next, like that. so that one was a bust. But the last one, she laughed, and she played it for more than 30 seconds or a minute, however long she usually devotes these games. But it's so fun to see her play those and other Let's Players, because they're not seeing me, they're just seeing the game. And that's what I like most about that compared to traditional, like we've been in Style Weekly and the Times Dispatch, and that's a completely different.
You don't get to hear them laughing.
No, I'm not sure they actually played our games. That's
That's probably more likely.
Or are they capable of laughter?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
always that. Well, kind of going off that, I was thinking about different YouTube formats. Like, for instance, there's like the Game Grumps and PewDiePie and stuff, and they do Let's Plays, but then they also do like these montages of themselves. And I was thinking about asking you guys, and certainly play Joe and Nick, like when you watch somebody do a Let's Play of a game, you're not playing the game with them, but it feels like you're enjoying it with them, and you get the same kind of information that you would out of a really concise article or really concise video, or even like an academic video that's talking about the mechanics of the game and like all this different stuff. But you get to experience that. It's like the joy of discovery. You get to see it with a Let's Play as opposed to like a montage or something. Have you guys considered doing other formats other than like Let's Play, and how do you think that would affect the way that the message gets across?
You want me to start?
Yeah, you can start.
Well, I'll start with so the thing that I think hooks people about the basic like long form Let's Play, where we're just playing through and narrating our experience, is that it's like hanging out on the couch with the people playing. Especially Game Grumps are my personal favorite. I feel like I'm sitting right there with them, just listening to their conversation. It kind of brings me back, actually. Nick and I are brothers. When we were playing video games as a kid, if it was a one-player game, one person had to sit and watch. And it was still a group experience. Even though you weren't playing the game, you got to experience the game.
Until the fighting began.
Until the fighting began, yeah. But you do lose that a little bit when you go into like a cut montage. If it's highlight reels, then it's going to be funnier probably, and it's even potentially better at hooking people to the content, because a long form Let's Play, you're asking a lot. You're saying, hey, watch our YouTube channel and invest yourselves in our personalities. And if you don't know who that person is, then it's a lot to ask. But when you have a little montage, that's immediately much more. We're going to see the highlight reel of this game, and your moments commentating it. So those are, I think, easier to sell, but they're a little bit less personal, which I prefer that personal aspect of a Let's Play, where you just sit down for 10 minutes and play through second for second. But it's harder to sell, and there's so much of it out there that there's the best reason to consider doing other stuff for us is trying to get more attention, but we want to do something that still has that personal community feel to it too.
And I mean, we have done other formats, and we certainly will continue to branch out into other formats, both for the reasons Joe said, as far as to hook other people, but also because all of this is a big experiment for us. Like, we're not professional video editors or audio technicians in any way. We just started this thing, and so learning is a huge part of why we do it, or at least why I do it, as far as like the editing side and whatnot. So we play with the formats just for fun, and that's pretty cool too. And there's also a lot of different reasons people do watch a Let's Play. Our sort of niche that we're going for is the hang out with us feel. Like, we want anyone watching to feel like they could be there in the conversation with us. But just as easily, there are people who watch for super informative Let's Plays, where they want to know everything about that game, from both the design build and everything that went into it, to secrets that are hidden in dark corners that you've never seen because you played the game but you didn't know that there was an unlock here or whatever. So and lots of different types of things in between. And then you've got the highlights, the funny moment videos, where it's just like, I just want to laugh really quick. I don't want to waste time in between. So I think those are all super valid formats, and we definitely experiment and will continue to experiment with that kind of thing.
When do you decide, like, do you ever fast forward? I noticed in some of your videos you'll fast forward through, if you die, you don't want people to just watch you slog through a little
Volgar the Viking is one of the hardest games we've ever played.
How much of the content that's lost in those fast forward moments do you really wish was still available for people?
There's sort of two sides to it. The first part being that we'll generally say, all right, we've killed too much time on this spot, so let's move on. And then we hang out super casually, so we're not on, we might say a funny thing, but we're not necessarily sitting up on mic, and we're not trying to talk to an audience, I guess, at that point. That said, there's still some really great moments sometimes. Like I recently took the dog out in a Volgar episode, and Joe was sitting there playing through a part, just trying to learn it, and he just started singing to himself by himself in an empty house. And it was one of my favorite moments that I found in editing, so I just cut it and put it in the episode. No reason not to. And we'll do stuff like that on SoundCloud as well. Just if it's a moment that we don't want to share the video, but we want to share that funny moment, we'll throw it up on our SoundCloud account, and people can listen to it if they want to. And it gets a lot less traffic, but it's preserved in some way.
It's kind of like extra features.
Yeah.
Raw version.
Disc 2.
Yeah. the 4-hour version of Lord of the Rings. So this is to whoever would like to field this. And the rest of the questions are kind of just some discussion topics that we can kind of branch out on, share your thoughts and stuff. Kind of a lot of traditional media, especially in game journalism, was kind of concerned with quantification and rating things, and that makes a lot of sense. Consumers want to know how should I spend this $60, right? But I think with a lot of new media, we're kind of moving away from that, and I think that's really nice because it's allowing journalists to develop their own kind of language about games that doesn't just fit down into the sounds good. But there's also a lot of kind of shared language among video game journalists. And what do you guys think about that? Does that shared language kind of just replace ratings? Is it just buzzwords now, or do you think that kind of shared language allows people to inform people better?
Well, I think, it's funny because playing games as much as we do now, just trying to find games to play, I don't end up watching reviews as much as I used to. But when I did, it was always those bullet points. What are the graphics like? What is the gameplay like? I think what reviews have kind of evolved to as games have become much more broad is what's the experience like. You have games like Journey that are much less defined by being a game and more defined by how it makes you feel. And so if you look through Steam reviews now, just people talking about it, they'll say, here are my pros and cons, but here's how I really feel about the game. And I think that's where it gets interesting because the pros and cons are whatever. Everybody has their different opinions on what graphics should look like. But the experience, you can find similarities in the way people describe what the game made them feel. And I think that's where reviews are picking up as games get more, I think as indie impacts the way games are developed, because distributors like Steam have brought more creative game design elements to the table.
Right, and also video games are media, and you guys are all creators, especially podcasts, let's play videos. People watch that because it is entertainment, so you are creating more than just some kind of journalism or just putting your opinions on paper. I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, so I think it's interesting that you mentioned this common language that video game articles have, even if they're not reviews. So a lot of these video game sites have been moving away from these 1 out of 10 review kind of things into more describing the experience of a game. But what I've seen is it's still totally, all the vocabulary and the writing is still within the realm of enthusiast gaming. So it's still very specific to people who are familiar with games and gamers. Even if there's a big article about, a game, you can't just give it to anyone on the street and have them understand it. It's still very much
Can we
a lot of stuff.
Can we talk about what that common language is that we're talking about? Are we talking genre, like we're saying shmups and stuff like that, or are we talking like, you know, just like those kind of words that people will say, like, oh, I got some invincibility frames, or
Right,
like
or
what is
difficulty, that kind of.
yeah, what is that language that for the purpose of the conversation?
Well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like, kind of the next thing I had on my list, which ties into this, is there's kind of a different language of design versus language of presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the same aspect, like how do you guys, how is it that, or how do you guys kind of, well, specifically, how do game developers feel about kind of a different, you kind of have to speak one language when you're designing a game and then speak another when you're explaining the game. Is that something that, like, maybe as game developers we should be more open about design terms? I was talking to Chris earlier about how a lot of consumers are more open to knowing how games are made. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I saw this like, were you gonna go?
No.
Okay. I saw this thing recently where it was an idea of, you know, stuff. Let's not talk about games in terms of genre, like first-person shooter, RTS, strategy, stuff like this. Those are like mechanical things. Instead, group games and experiential kind of thing. So like a short-form kind of game where you beat in one sitting, or a long-form game where you're playing, you know, 10 hours a week, and you know, after 6 months you've completed it. Like, these are completely different ways to consume a game, and those kinds of ways of looking at games are more important than, oh, are you like in a first person view or are you in a third person view? Like, that doesn't really matter compared to this the overall arc of like, how are you actually experiencing the game?
Yeah, and especially because like those experiences, I feel like are more where game developers start. You know, that's at the starting point, and then you use mechanics to achieve that goal. And so, yeah, I think you're right that talking about the experiences might be more worthwhile than the mechanics.
Yeah, it's definitely like a design first kind of thing, because I don't know about you guys, but we make games generally like we want to achieve an emotion or a feeling, and then you figure out what mechanics reach that. So maybe talking about that emotion, that overall feeling that we're trying to achieve, that's what we should be talking about.
Yeah, it's sort of a working backwards thing nowadays, and especially with I think the indie scene. A lot of people, you know, start with something and, you know, they have an idea, but it's kind of based on, you know, the subject matter is just so different than it used to be. You know, it's like, oh, just make a game so someone has something to play, and now it's really something that somebody wants to show you about themselves. And, you know, I guess in relation to the question, like, yeah, I would love to talk more about that process. You know, like, I would hope that, you know, we could, because I think that would bring more people into the space. More people would be willing to play them, because people still think, oh, it's Mario, oh, it's Pac-Man, but it's just not that anymore.
I mean, I have mixed feelings about the quantification. So I think ultimately the quantification is not the problem, right? Like, movies are quantified. They get stars, they get thumbs. No one sits around being like, how dare you put thumbs on my movie? You know, in fact, Ebert would get criticized for the thumbs. And he'd say, you know, they would say they were reductionist and there were, you know, there was no nuance to them. And he said, look, people want a recommendation. They want to know, should I go see this or should I not? So at the end of the day, that's what we're telling them. I think the bigger problem is, you know, just the lens in which you're applying the game or the experience. Like something like That Dragon Cancer, which I thought was just extremely powerful and honest and brave.
Painful.
Got just a lot, you know, got really mixed reviews, and it surprised me. And they were mostly for technical reasons. There were these, and I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but there was a lot, you know, but it was there was like an excessive, it basically was, even if you didn't put a score on it, an excessive weighting. This is the old-fashioned, well, you know, usability, graphics, gameplay, fun factor, you know, and so it's like that mindset is still being funneled through an essay instead of a matrix. And so to me, it's more about changing the mindset of the player and the critic, and not whether it's communicated in numbers or in a paragraph or in a YouTube video or in a podcast.
Yeah, I think, well, what I was trying to get to before my brain kind of didn't, was that you guys are creators and people do gravitate towards different creators. Like, I might not enjoy Jonathan Blow's games, but I might enjoy Lambeer games, But that's no specific kind of like judgment on either of those developers, except for I'm more suited to them. I think people seek out different podcasts or Let's Play channels in the same fashion. So I think that your personality and what you bring to this discussion, like, it's no longer just like informative. It's people treat a lot of creators now as, we're all artists and we enjoy what different artists make. So I think that really kind of blows the whole rating system. Like, it's no longer useful to me, at least, at all. But
you don't get a score out of 10 in an art gallery either. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like because graphics have kind of plateaued a bit for years, like it's the graphical argument, and a lot of those other arguments that kind of spring off of that. Like, it doesn't feel like it's changing much. Like, if that was kind of your horizontal, we're looking in a vertical direction now in terms of what can you do, regardless of what the graphics are in a video game. And so that matrix, the essay format, is becoming less and less important because you kind of expect a game's graphical threshold to be whatever it is, depending on how big the production team was. And it's sometimes you can still be impressed by the graphics of a game or by the technical execution, but then you look at a game like Undertale, which is much more about the design, and it's hard to quantify design theory in any set of small numbers. It's more about that experience, and I think that draws out more flavorful reviews and better discussions in video games.
Right. So the three developers, how do you guys? I know, like, when I started making video games, the way I consumed video games changed drastically. I looked at everything through a different lens. On the same token, how has being a developer affected your consumption of games media?
Having created games, now that I play games, if it doesn't have a gameplay mechanic that doesn't interest me, I can't play it anymore. If the gameplay is not interesting, meaning, there's nothing new or exciting about it, it's not doing anything different than previous games. It just doesn't interest me anymore. Whereas when I was a kid, I could play sequels and sequels of anything. I could play the same old Mario game over and over and over, but I don't know. It's like I'm not patient enough anymore.
And when you read like the reviews of or like even watch other people play or talk about those games, what like is it different for you now? Like, can you pick up a Game Informer and just flip through it casually, or are you like?
Do they still publish that?
I might be kind of out of the loop.
I mean, I personally can't do that anymore because, like, knowing what goes into making a game on any level, like, even if it's just a small jam or if it's, something, any indie has made, I look at it and immediately, like, okay, if it's mechanically cool, that's a bonus for me. But I'm also like, wow, they finished it. Like, they made it. Because that's still such a big deal. And I mean, even though we have all these tools and, everybody has access and can make games now, like, I think that kind of makes me have a greater appreciation for, what people can create and actually how hard it is to get your idea down, because just because you have the tools doesn't mean you can communicate it. So, I get a little overly defensive for other games when I read the reviews, I think. But,
you don't know if those people have gone?
Yeah, you have no idea. And I'd be like, I met that guy at a convention and he was like slaving over that animation and you just said it sucked. And I'm just, nah,
Yeah.
So you kind of get in that mindset, I think.
Yeah, there's certainly this amazement to it when you get to the title screen and it comes up and says Undertale by Toby Fox, and your jaw just drops. And you're like, how did he make all of this himself, just one person? And you're kind of in awe of a lot of those elements. It's really fun. But other games, the fun is kind of stripped away when all you're looking at you're looking at the graphics and you're looking at you're trying to figure out how it was made. Similar to if you've ever painted something, you're looking at other people's paintings and trying to figure out how they made it. You lose something when you get to know it.
Yeah, you're looking at the brush strokes and you're going, what kind of brush was that? And,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think similar to what they said, it's like, I think Mike said it best, you get overly defensive of other games. Especially for me, it's like when I see any complaints about like the price of a game or the length of a game, it's like, it makes absolutely no sense to me anymore. Because it's like, what a standard consumer will want from a game is so totally different from what I want from a game.
So are you justifying the price of Metal Gear Solid 5, the 2-hour version?
Yes. Ground Zero's 2 hours, $30.
Because Bowman and I probably put like 80 hours between us.
Yeah,
right.
Full disclosure,
I
got it for free on PS Plus. So.
Oh, okay.
But it was very good. I would pay $30. But yeah, so that's the thing. It's like, the beginner's guide, $10, 90 minutes, absolutely worth it, right? So it's just like things like this. And I remember as a kid, I would always do this calculation in my head. It's like, oh, I got this game for $20 and I got 80 hours of gameplay. That's 25 cents an hour. It's awesome. And now I look at that mindset and it makes just no sense to me.
I think I'm actually having the opposite feeling with like the price of video games. I've played a lot of games that are like $15 now, and I'm like, I want to pay $60 for this and have it be much bigger. Like Child of Light is one of my favorite RPGs ever, and for $15 it delivers way more than I thought it would, but I would have happily paid $45 more for like a full, AAA length. But so I think it's interesting that, because game pricing has kind of shifted. Unless you're like getting every AAA title there is, there's so much to get for so much less, and I feel like the indie producers put so much more heart into that amount that you're actually paying for those games.
Well, they have to.
Yeah.
Because it's a manpower thing,
Actually, I kind of do the opposite of that. I wish I could pay more to make a game shorter. So like, Metal Gear Solid 5. And Metal Gear Solid 5 is like, what, 65 hours?
Yeah.
I would pay triple for that to be 10 hours.
You can pre-order for the 10-hour version.
Yeah.
I would love it. I would adore it. Xenoblade X. If I could get a version of that was 10 hours, I would adore it.
Well, especially with Metal Gear, when they started giving you like free add-on stuff, like, stuff that would typically be in kind of like a DLC. Like as soon as I saw like those extra guns pop up in the like development thing, I was like, man, I don't want to grind for this.
Yes.
Like, yeah. So we're kind of at a state in the game industry, especially with indie games, that the games media is kind of an intermediary between developers and consumers. Like, it's an interesting position because you would assume that the availability of games online would make it so that distribution for independent developers would be easy. And it's a lot easier than it would have been if we didn't have the internet, for sure. But with the media, they don't really act as gatekeepers, but they definitely act as shepherds to a large portion of the audiences that we're going for. What can we do as a community of developers and Let's Players and podcasters and reviewers to smooth that interaction out as much as possible? Do you guys have any ideas on that? Or do you just think that it's as good as it gets?
I think the thing that's interesting is that there's so many entry-level games. Like, because you're talking to, I think people who are in gaming, who play games regularly, they know what they're looking for the most part. But for the way the casual market has exploded, there's so many entry level things that kind of, you start off with Angry Birds, but then you're looking at all your mobile phone games, and all it takes is to find a game that has a little bit more depth to it. And I think, for me at least, going through what I liked in video games through my entire life, it was, okay, these are the kind of gameplay mechanics that I like. Let me go hunt down games that look like they have similar mechanics. So I think it ends up being a personal. It asks the person who's playing to look for what they're looking for.
Right.
So I don't know if there's for journalists to shepherd them more specifically, but it's such a broad thing that you kind of have to find what you want yourself, and so that it's two sides of the journalists can show what it is, but you still have to decide what you want in gaming.
Right.
As a player.
We've all been very concerned with there should be a iTunes for games, which Steam has been filled, but maybe there should be a Pandora for video games.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
I love that idea.
There's also sort of on our scale, we're not influencing anyone to buy a game. We're very small Let's Players, but there is, PewDiePie and those other big guys who do have that influence, and there's, I think, an opening it's starting to get filled, but I think there's a lot of room there to service being an intermediary between developers and Let's Players and other media, to sort of connect people, because for someone like us, where we're very small, we don't have industry contacts where we can, reach out to get games or anything like that. Occasionally, we'll get a lot of indie developers who will send us keys for things, but we don't know if we want to do it or not do it necessarily until we've checked it out, and then it feels like we take something from them. But there have been a couple services that have come up. There's a service called Keymailer, which developers can sort of set up a number of keys that they give to Keymailer. Keymailer then distributes those to Let's Players, seemingly by black magic, though. There's no, I don't have any idea how they decide who gets what, other than they do base it somehow on channel size and things like that, because certainly bigger Let's Players get the bigger AAA games and things like that. And then there's another one called Dietrich Online Services, where he just basically has a mailing list almost, where you can you sign up for it, he emails out when he puts new games on it, and you can go on his website and request games. But those are there's 2 out of a handful of them that exist, and I think there's a lot of room for someone to come in and fill a space there, sort of bridging developers and media. I mean, from us, I talk from a Let's Player perspective, but I think from the podcast perspective and stuff too, as far as making some sort of connection there more tangible.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is more, because my entry point was as a journalist at Slate and Wired, Rolling Stone, and New York Times, and places like that. I know all the PR people, and they all have their fingers crossed that maybe this will be the game that gets into the paper.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have, I get so much in my inbox that I sort of have the opposite problem. I just have trouble keeping up with what I have and what I should be paying attention to. From a sort of economy of journalism perspective, I think from a sort of substantive perspective of what is available out there to read and watch and listen to is better than it's ever been. I can read all these terrific writers. I can listen to great podcasts. I can watch videos. I can the stuff that's out there for you to consume about video games, to read and watch and listen to is far superior than it's ever been. But the economy of it seems like a nightmare to me. Fewer and fewer, the mainstream publications virtually don't cover video games, treat it like it doesn't exist. It's somehow both omnipresent and out of the mainstream. Unless it's like a Grand Theft Auto size phenomenon. There's virtually no tradition of treating a game the way you treat something like The Hurt Locker, a movie that made $15 million in the United States, which would be considered a just gigantic bust by Hollywood standards. But because it was regarded as exemplary work, won all these Oscars, and the NPR, the New York Times, and NBC News, and New York Magazine, everybody assume that you've seen it. In reality, almost no one's seen it.
I think the biggest thing I remember from like major news coverage was, I think it was Roger Ebert who said video games aren't art at one point, and that caused a big discussion in bigger media.
Sure. I feel like, and I'll probably talk about this around 6, but there are these moments where the media decides, by that I mean sort of the news media, decides they're going to pay attention to games. And that happened in the 70s, it happened in the early 80s, it happened in the late 80s, it happened in the 90s, it happened about 4 or 5 years ago. And then they decide, okay, we did that, that was good. We're going
back to the Kardashians.
Well, not that, it's back to, and it's hard to separate it from the total cratering of the print media over the past decade. The idea that they're trying to protect the fortresses that they have, and that the important things to cover, including wars and politics and national affairs and Oregon standoffs, all these other things. How many new areas are you going to go colonize while you're in this embattled position? But I don't know. There's just like amazing writers. Simon Parkin. I don't think he has a job writing about video games. He sometimes writes for the New Yorker and other places. I mean, it's just, and I know that film critics are under siege, music critics are under siege. So it's not, so it's even harder to say, hey, dance critics, everyone's under siege. The total decimation of local newspapers has eliminated hundreds of jobs for these people. So I certainly, if I could solve that, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be off solving it. But so I think from a consumer standpoint, it's a golden age. From a creator standpoint, I don't know what to do about it.
Well, something, just going on this whole subject, I think the most powerful and underutilized tool we have as indies, and I mean that as the indie game space and the kind of indie media space, as it were, is collaboration. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of cross promotion and stuff is not taken advantage of, and I think that's something we could do a lot of. For example, our buddy Jason over at Pixel Please has this cool puzzle robot fighter game, and our game has multiple players in it. And I talked to him about, hey, how about we put one of your players in our game? So everybody knows, hey, that's from their game, they're over there, they're across the way, go play their stuff. And I mean, in media, same thing, and I'm sure you guys do that all the time,
mm-hmm. Yep.
Cross promote. But I think that's really underutilized, and I think that's what we can do as developers to kind of bridge that gap between media, us, and the consumer.
Yeah, because it feels almost a little dirty to say hey, you guys want to help us out in some way, give us your game and then we'll play it.
People are afraid.
And then for an audience of 10, we've helped you so tiny, but yeah, they're definitely, I mean, we've built our entire channel of what we do have on collaboration basically with other Let's Players. That is our entire community. The people who watch us also make the same kind of content as us, mostly anyway. I mean, a good 50% of them at least. But it feels a little weird, and maybe it goes back to the forcing yourself, like you talked about at the beginning of the panel. We are introverts, or at least at times, I guess. Joe is not. But putting yourself out there to make that connection is tough. So yeah, it's weird. I don't know if I had a point with that. I was just gonna agree.
Well, I know as a game developer, it's a lot of fun to see smaller YouTube channels cover your game. It would be a great boon if Game Grumps were to play one of my games. It would have millions of eyes on it, but at the same time, it feels like I'm not contributing to their channel, And one of the things I really like about smaller channels playing my games is that I can share it to all of my followers, and even though I don't have this huge amount of followers, it's still something that would be of value to that channel.
And it builds something meaningful. Yeah.
Right. And so maybe there could be kind of more piggybacking up the ladder kind of action.
I think I've seen also the smaller Let's Play channels, the conversion of oh, you have this video on the channel, how many new purchases do you get, is way higher for smaller channels.
Right.
I've seen reports of games, indie games, like Global Game Jam games, that go on PewDiePie or Markiplier or something. 10 million views and maybe 1,000 new sales, right? Like,
Yeah.
so the reasons people watch these huge channels isn't, oh, I want to look for the next game that I want to buy. That's not why they watch it. They want to watch PewDiePie or Markiplier.
Right.
Whereas with smaller channels, it's really interesting because it's like, oh, these are Richmond locals. They know what's cool. They have this sense of culture and style.
Do we?
Yeah, I think so. Well, that's
The
the
sunglasses.
Style.
Yeah, sunglasses are great.
My collar.
That's never been said about me.
No, that's not Richmond style. But the idea is like when people watch these smaller channels, they trust the opinions, and they're like, oh, they like this game, so I'm gonna go check it out, maybe buy it.
It's because the consumer understands. I mean, they're on that level. If they're really shopping for a good, new, fresh game, a lot of people are looking to the indie scene. So it makes sense to go to the smaller channels because they're going to play something that's more meaningful to them and get more information there.
Also, I think the ability for a smaller channel to really communicate, like if you have a YouTube channel and a video gets 10 posts, you can respond to all 10 and be able to build a more meaningful community than. I mean, even though Game Grumps will fill, giant speaking halls to just talk to people, but like they can't really talk with their fans like smaller channels.
The community that we've got for what it is, for the size that it is the best thing that we've gotten out of this channel. We've made genuine friends, and we hang out with them more than just them listening to us and commenting back and forth. Like, we play games with them outside of our channel. We tweet with them. They become genuine friends. And if the channel was really large, we wouldn't be able to do that. If we were getting that mess of comments, there's no way you can go through them all. So it is kind of a cool part of having just a small channel where the community is really meaningful to us.
Cool. You guys have kind of wrapped up a lot of questions that I wanted to ask already, so we have plenty of time for some audience Q&A if you guys have any questions. And we have, some really interesting panelists here. Don't feel free to have your question be about anything that they can answer, not just about what we've talked about so far. So.
Especially if you're asking Joe, it could be anything.
And, I'll be. There's not many of you, so feel free to raise your hand or just word out. I think it can.
This is just kind of more of like a light question for like any or all of you or whatever. But I mean, I was arguing. I said this is just kind of like a light question for any or all of you. But obviously you guys are involved in games in some way because like you grew up or you play games at the point in your life. Like for each of you, like what was like the game and sort of like the thing in the end that made you say like I want to get involved with this or I want to make games or like things are different. The way I see this is different now. Right?
This is a tough question.
We actually talked about this not too long ago. I remember specifically. I know talking to people who are older than me. They had fewer games to play with. They had the one game on their console they would play over and over again. I was really lucky. I was born into a family where all my uncles had a bunch of games. So from the time that I was really young, I had access to Zelda and Mario and Ninja and Battletoads and just everything. So I had a huge shoebox of games I could play with.
Yeah, and games have just always been part of our lives. Yeah. It's weird. We were born into a family with like late teen, early 20s uncles who still lived close to home. And so they all bought the consoles that existed at the times through our upbringing, and we got to play with their stuff constantly. So it was almost like games are just everything. Like there wasn't a lot outside of it that we couldn't imagine a world without it, I guess. And so it's so part of us that I don't think there was a moment. Although I do like some of my earliest gaming memories are with this really random Nintendo NES game called Mighty Bomb Jack that for some reason I loved as a kid, and I don't know why. but yeah, no one defining moment really I can think of.
For me, I know as a kid, my mom wouldn't let us play video games for a long time, and the old it'll rot your brain thing. So for me, it was going to my friend's house, and they had a Super Nintendo, and I was just absolutely obsessed with it to the point where they didn't want to hang out with me anymore because all I wanted to do was play Mario Paint. And that was my favorite thing, was just to play that little fly swatter game on there and to create things. And it was the same at home. We did have a computer, and I had kid pics from the time I was 3. So always making things on the computer and creating things, or changing the icons on the computer, and just trying to annoy my mom with the computer and using the microphone and making things. That's really what got me into art and games and interactive things and comics and everything, was being able to use a video game console as a creative device.
If I could piggyback on that real quick, a very similar experience to you, in that, like, really the moment that captured me was I had played games a lot when I was little. Played the NES, I had a Sega and all that, and then I got PlayStation. I started playing RPGs, and when I realized that there could be a narrative to games, that's when it captured me. I was like, wait, like, this is a storytelling device. Because what it sounds like you were saying, like, I was attracted to the ability to tell a story, and that's why I really liked comics, and that's why I drew comics. But then I was like, wait, games is kind of the same thing, only it's like animation married with stories. It's like almost better than movies in a way, because you play it. So it kind of had the full package for me.
So it's interesting to hear their perspectives, because they're artists. Like, they're really good at art. I'm horrible at art. So what got me into games was like the mechanics and the gameplay. But I didn't really realize how important gameplay and mechanics could be for the narrative until, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was in like middle school, and Prince of Persia: Sands of Time came out. And that was like the first game I played where it had this incredible gameplay, this incredible world, and this incredible narrative, and they were all perfectly seamless, right? It was all one unit. It wasn't an RPG with this story and then the gameplay is totally separate. Like, it was all completely married together, and that's when I kind of realized, like, the video game medium is so strong compared to other mediums.
I mean, I played games growing up. I don't know how old people are, but I'm 40, right? So I played arcade games and Atari games and then Nintendo games. And then I'm of a generation that we put games away. Like, they were for, or if you played them, you were a little embarrassed about it. Like, it was this sort of furtive, nerdy activity that you did. And maybe everybody was doing it, but we certainly weren't talking to each other about it. And I remember in college, we all looked at each other and we were all like, wait, we all want to be playing video games. Why aren't we playing them, right? And then we brought the consoles in and set up Super Tecmo Bowl leagues and all things that, like, are sort of part of youth culture. We sort of had to reinvent or invent for ourselves. And I started writing about games for Slate in 2005 after I'd edited some game columns by Clive Thompson, who's a writer of some renown, and Clive didn't want to do it anymore, so they asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said, sure. I think if you look at my early work, you can see that I don't necessarily take it all that seriously. Like, I take the craft of writing the column seriously, but I don't think I take the medium seriously. I think I treat it the way you might see some people think when they see a game like that, Dreading Cancer. Oh wait, I thought games are just for diversion, they're just for distraction, they're just for fantasy escapism. I think I reviewed The Godfather the game, and I was like, well, this has nothing to do with The Godfather, and makes no, gives you none of the sense of the themes of The Godfather, but it's pretty entertaining to go around this world and shake down shops and, in this Grand Theft Auto clone, which is what it was. But I would say around 2008, when I played BioShock and Portal and Raid and Flower, was when I really thought, this medium's doing really something really interesting, and it probably deserves more respect and attention than it's getting.
I think, it's unfortunate that some of the biggest games that are being promoted in the media are kind of the generic ones, like your Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty. Those are the most boring games that are coming out of the industry, and those are the front page games.
You may have insulted half the people here potentially.
That's how I feel. I mean, Flower to me is the front page game. It was one of the most interesting experiences I had in gaming because it was. I mean, it like you talk about escapism. That game changes the rules of what the game is. You know, once you're starting to match with the logic of what that world is, it's such a more engrossing experience than doing the same thing that you've done over and over again. When you step into a new Call of Duty game, you know exactly what it's going to be. When you step into a game like Flower, it's going to take you away because you're experiencing so much newness, so much novelty, and yeah.
Is it cheating if I ask one even though?
No.
So yeah, I would like to know what all of your thoughts are really about censorship and video game rating systems. This is like as creators and consumers and critics of games, do you think about ratings when you're playing and like why those exist? And if you are creating a work, do you consider that when you're creating, like, I want to make a game that's, you know, playable for everyone, or I want to make a game that's naughty and only for adults? So, you know, do you think about things like that while you're making games? And do you think about things like that while you're playing games also?
Just like that there. So as a developer, I'm always conscious of, and this is just me, like other developers don't do this at all, but I'm always conscious of who the audience of my game is, who am I making the game for, and I try to, you know, make sure that the game is designed for that audience. So, you know, if we're making like Clash Cup Turbo, we're trying to be it's a very accessible game because we want anyone to play it, inexperienced gamers, children, adults, anyone. So that informs our design decisions a lot. Other games I've made like a parody Japanese dating sim kind of game. The audience of that is obviously totally different, but I still keep in mind that audience when designing. So that does influence
the tropes that you have to have.
It's like there's a lot of, you know,
there's convention to
in that game. Yeah, there's a lot of things you have to know to find the game funny, but I make the game with that in mind. Other developers, they try to like stay pure and they just make their own vision and they don't care about who's going to play it, which is totally valid. But yeah.
I mean, Momin basically said everything that I wanted to say because with Clash Cup, that's what we did. We looked at our audience and we said, okay, we want to make a game for this type of person or this amount of people, and it basically was just the broadest spectrum possible. So that's what we did. But in general, like, I'm always thinking of, I'm not thinking necessarily in terms of ratings when I'm making the game. I'm thinking of like, so what's the best way to communicate it, right? So I think that as far as the rating system is concerned, like, you know, that's good that we have that for, you know, so parents can identify what's good or bad, you know, and what they do and don't want their kids to see, etc. But for me, the censorship part of it, like, you know, I just want, in the media of games, like anything else, like you should be able to tell the story the way you intended to tell it. Right. And so when you're creating games, like that's the number one thing I'm thinking of is how am I going to tell the story? And I'm going to tell it the way I want to tell it, regardless of how it's received in terms of rating, I guess.
Go ahead.
I guess when I'm creating a Game Jam game, since that's what I've done for the most part, I've done, I guess, 8 of them now. The thing that I have almost top of mind is accessibility, which is, it can be an interesting gameplay mechanic, it doesn't have to be, but for example, a lot of games now have a colorblind mode where you can switch this, you know, option in the settings screen, and it makes it more friendly for colorblind people, because you take a matching game like 2 Dots, so that's not colorblind friendly. There's a lot of people that can't access that game, but they added in this feature to change the dots into different shapes rather than different colors. So for me, accessibility is really important, because you exclude a lot of people when, say, you use a mouse and a keyboard. Well, someone who, you know, can't use both at the same time, might not be able to play it, or you're using audio cues but they can't hear it. So there's lots of things to keep in mind, and even just simple things like using WASD as your control scheme doesn't work all over the world because people use different keyboards. So using the arrow keys instead, and also avoiding WASD because I hate to use the word normal people, but normal people don't know what WASD means.
Accessibility outside of gamers as well.
Yeah.
I mean, as a podcaster, we try to be PG rated. We violated that a few times. I think next week I forgot to tell our guests that we try to be a PG rated podcast, and some of the best things she said came in a flurry of F-bombs and G-dams, and so I thought, well, we might keep those. But
I'm looking forward to that episode.
That's just a thing I try to do because there aren't any podcasts. Like I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and most podcasts that I listen to, I couldn't listen in the car with them. And so one of the goals for the podcast, even though we've broken it a few times, is to say, well, this is a show that you could bring into your home and not be afraid to have the whole family listen to it, or to listen to it with your 12-year-old son or daughter. For games itself, I have no problem with ratings, but I think it's, they're like anything else. I perhaps don't think as deeply as I should about well, who is this game for? Because I sort of always assume I'm writing for an adult player, and obviously you certainly see a lot of parents buying, games that are not for children for their children. GTA. Grand Theft Auto especially. And so, but I guess I don't regard that as my job or responsibility. That's clearly adult entertainment for adults.
And I think
adult entertainment is.
I played Max Payne as a kid. I was really young, and that game is.
You talk about how that impacted you. It didn't do anything for I love the game, but it didn't affect me in any way.
Well, I think it desensitized me to violence and some of those things a little bit. I think it mostly has to do with parenting. It's the responsibility for teaching your child the difference between video game violence and real world violence, or substance abuse, or anything in video games. They have to understand the disconnect. And that's about, if your parent is involved with the child, then they're going to be, I think, less taught by the game. You have to establish what teaches your children, and if you're not actively involved with your children, then they'll take from learning from video games. But I had a very active family, so Max Payne, it was just, I was like, oh, this is video game violence, and I just,
You haven't killed anyone yet.
No, not yet.
This is going to make me seem super fogyish, but people focus on video game violence and everything. I mean, across popular culture, everything is more violent. The stuff you see on primetime television would never have been shown on primetime television when I was a kid. I can't watch football games live with my children because I don't know what kind of lurid advertisement is going to pop up in the middle of a game, and people get shot and killed on Sunday afternoon in my living room. It's crazy. This is
Shakespeare also.
Yeah, but I don't let my 5-year-old. I don't take my 5-year-old to Hamlet either.
Yeah, I was gonna say I played Max Payne when I was a kid also, and it did affect me greatly. To this day, I'm still obsessed with bullet time and slow-mo. Right?
So good. Yeah. So good.
Yeah. And it's because of Max Payne.
Yeah.
But yeah, not the violence thing.
Our channel, to answer the other part of the question, which is when we pick games to play. So we have to pick games to play that other people are going to watch us play, right? We're fairly uncensored, but there is the YouTube side of it where I guess we could get flagged for certain things. So we have to sort of watch out for that. But I think we do kind of consider that what's out there is really up to the parents to decide if their kid should be playing that game or if they should be watching someone play that game. And we just kind of, maybe it's irresponsible, but we just kind of put it out there and hope for the best, I think.
Yeah. So I think the general consensus is that there's these rating systems, but most of us, we kind of just try to keep things based on what the audience, it's a voluntary thing, right?
Do you think as an independent developer, there's less pressure for you to adhere or fit into the rating system?
There was a political push not too long ago that suggested that if you have your game for sale, it must be rated.
Yeah. That is the case for physical releases. Like Best Buy will not sell an unrated game, but Steam will. Right. So a lot of games, like Undertale, for example, is unrated. You know, so they can't sell at Best Buy, but they can sell on Steam.
But it seems like also like movies are much more concerned with saying like, oh, this can't be R-rated. We need to cut it so that it's PG-13. Whereas games, it's kind of like maybe the M helps. Like,
right?
Yeah,
it does. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that it's like the opposite. Like if you're in a AAA studio, the pressure is to put guns and blood into it so you can get the M rating and get the teenagers to buy it.
Or to
whereas we're indie, it's like, we have this cute, cartoony, multiplayer game. We don't need to put blood in it, right? Like, there's no reason for us to put blood in it, so it'll stay rated E, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely say that there's much less pressure, because I think that again everybody's just trying to get whatever story they have across or whatever gameplay they thought up down and getting someone to play it. So I don't. Maybe, I don't know if it's, you said irresponsible earlier, but, I believe that people have the ability to choose what they do and don't want to see, and I think that parents...
It's not my problem, it's their problem.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you're just going to be offended, and sometimes you're not. So.
I think the most obvious parent in the room, Tom back there, hey Tom. Weren't you inquiring on Facebook if they had ever considered putting blood in?
Oh, okay. Oh, you made that comment, yeah.
In Clash Cup?
Yeah. Yes.
We need...
You can hit them, it's just no blood.
But you do have some sort of flourish or some sort of...
Yeah, they scoot around and influence each other a little bit.
We de-emphasize, we don't want you to...
Also, the lack of blood will make it only appeal to the kids as parents, not the kids themselves, right? To appeal to kids. I remember being a kid.
I think that the kids they find it pretty fun as it is. I think.
Well, so far we.
Well,
so far we haven't had any demand for blood, but we've had that question a lot. Well, except for
there's demand for blood, right?
But most people have asked us though, can you hit each other with the bats? And that's kind of something we've been back and forth on. But I think if we did do that,
if you can, it doesn't make sense.
Well, you can, but not to the degree that's like a fighting game where they fall over and But I think if we did, I'd want to handle it very Looney Tunes style. Start circling the head like Tweety Birds, because that's kind of the tone of the game.
There's also a general hockey vibe, which is a contact sport.
True, that's very true.
Well, it's more like air hockey, which is less contact.
We could go all Blades of Steel on it and just have the mini scene where they throw off their gloves and you have mash A and B to beat each other up.
Man, I love Blades of Steel.
Yeah, Blades of Steel is so good. Anyway, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, because in NES hockey, you get a fight and they just kind of went into a big scrum and fought themselves. But in Blades of Steel, there was an actual fighting mini game. Where once you got into a fight, and then if you beat the other guy in the fight, he went to the penalty box.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So you could go body check a guy, provoke him into a fight, and then send him to the penalty box.
Yeah.
So run out and get Blades of Steel with your local...
Good. It's all been one big long advertisement for Blades of Steel.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any thoughts about, I know we talked about cost earlier, but not individual price of games, but just the fact that to what extent it is a problem or isn't a problem that playing video games is such an expensive hobby.
I think Nick has a pretty solid solution that he goes with, so I'll go ahead and let...
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I went a couple years back and I decided that I had a huge Steam library that was ridiculous because I was just addicted to buying Humble Bundles and everything else, that I would just take a year off from buying games and just try to play as much in my library as I could, which is probably like, you know, heresy to a lot of people, but I did, and I made it the year. I got some help because my wife bought me like a Steam gift card at Christmas, like, you know, halfway through the year. I was like, that doesn't count. I could buy like a couple games. But I made it through my year, and then after that, like, now there's so many games that have come out in that year that are suddenly on sale. So I pretty much play games a year behind constantly, and I will not pay more than 50% of, I wait until a Steam sale goes down to 50%, and then I pick it up. And
is that dependent on the original price, or just, is that
it's just whatever it says 50%. I don't really research it, but if it says 50%, that's when it's okay for me to pick it up. And that has helped. And also Humble Bundles. Like, I still buy all the Humble Bundles now, and so, you know, I guess I'm not tracking like the actual cost of those games because I'm just like, I know I'm getting a deal. If it's, you know, if the $15 is the cost for, you know, Beat the Average plus the extra bonus game, I'll just pay the $15 because I know I'm getting more than $15 worth of value out of that. And so yeah, that's my sort of policy, and I think that keeps it very affordable, like worth the cost rather. Because I mean, I'm getting way more hours of entertainment out of it. If I go out and buy dinner and spend $30 to feed my wife and I, then it's gone, right? Like, I ate it and it's done. But if I spend $15 on a Humble Bundle, how many hundreds of hours am I getting out of that potentially? So to me, it's a non-issue, but I don't know if other people. I mean, again, because of my policy. Someone paying $60 a game for a AAA title may disagree because I don't buy that.
I know that I'm personally destitute, and I have hundreds of games in my Steam library.
Yeah.
And so it's either not a problem because games are so affordable that I can amass this collection, or it's such a problem that I'm destitute because of my Steam library. And I don't really know which is true, but
yeah. I feel like if we could get over the temptation for all the new titles that come out, there's so much free-to-play out there that is so deep. You know, I mean, there's League of Legends, or there's Path of Exile, or there's just infinite free games on Steam. I could easily find all the gameplay I need just from free games. I'm not going to, because I'm going to see a game that's like, oh, I need that, and I'm going to buy it anyhow. But
or checking out their Game Jam entries.
Or Game Jam entries. I mean, there's so much to access for free on the internet that it's kind of amazing to me that people spend money. But I mean, like, I know I couldn't stop buying games, even though I've got tons of unplayed games in my Steam library.
Yeah, it's definitely an addiction. I still buy, even though I don't need to.
That's collecting too.
I think it depends on the types of games that you play. I know we all play indie games, so those are generally on the cheaper side, and a lot of them come in a bundle. So that's kind of what I play, but I think there is a large barrier to entry on AAA games, because you have to invest in a computer that can run them, or a $500 console, and then the games itself can be $50-$60 if it's a really big game. So there is kind of a high barrier to entry compared to like paying $10 to see a movie. But it depends on what types of games you play, obviously.
Would a sort of counter argument be that having that high barrier entry sort of breeds fanaticism, though, where we're all like, well, I got this huge rig and look how great it's going to be. So now, like, you do play the AAA game. You're playing, Just Cause 3, which is like, it's a cool game. It looks fantastic, right? The big explosions and whatnot. But isn't it a little bit repetitive too? Like, you just go around shooting things constantly, but you're super hyped about it because you had to have a good PC to play it, and you had to have the $60 to buy the game, and it sort of could be pseudo beneficial to the thing, I guess, where you could have a lesser quality product, but because you bought into it, you're getting hyped. So
yeah, I was gonna say that I don't think games are that expensive, especially compared to like any other hobby, like soccer, biking, skiing, or anything. Like those are super expensive. But then you brought up a good point. I think the barrier to getting one console, like that's not that expensive, but to get two, that's like way bigger, right? So it does breed this sort of favoritism, the fanboyism, where it's like, oh, I could only get a PS4. I can't get an Xbox One because I already have a PS4. So I'm psychologically way more attached to a PS4, and actually I have to like dismiss the value of the Xbox One to justify my purchase of the PS4.
I did.
Yeah, exactly. Just like,
I think a lot of people.
So I think you're right. Although I think, you know, nowadays it's, even if you just have a crappy laptop or not a dedicated, you don't need a dedicated machine, you just have the same laptop you use for school or work or whatever, you can go on like itch.io, just the front page alone, tons of games, free, $2, $3 at most, and you can like build up like a really awesome collection of really awesome, unique games. Very cheap. Like you said, there's like free games, League of Legends, stuff like that. So I think if people want to get into, you know, they want to experience gameplay and like see different designs and stuff like that, like I don't think the barrier of entry isn't that high. To get into like the hardcore gamer,
the bro gaming,
yeah, that kind of like culture.
That's when you're buying like hats and stuff.
Yeah. That's when you're like waiting outside GameStop at like 1 a.m. to get the new Call of Duty. Like to get into that, there's a barrier of entry, but like you shouldn't really want to get into that culture. That's okay. I think it's okay.
I think it's an okay culture, but
you don't need that to
When
enjoy
people are
video games.
waiting at 1 a.m. in the morning to buy Clash Cup Turbo.
Buy our t-shirts. I would rather them be at home and enjoy the comfort of their home. But okay.
Well, I mean, honestly, what I tell a lot of people, you know, is they're like, oh, I don't really get into consoles. I'm not really into that. This is kind of a tangential, but I'm like, get a Wii U. Because I mean, it's a much cheaper console, and there's some awesome games on there. And so I'm kind of a Nintendo fanboy, but you know, the barrier for entry, I think it depends on, you know, what you guys were talking about, kind of the bro gamer and the casual gamer is a, you know, kind of a distinguishing factor there too. So.
Right, and video game culture has existed for so long that you can have a really AAA meaningful experience if you just go like put $50 down on a PS2 and play that insanely huge library of games.
It's true.
But yeah, I also wait at least a year before buying a AAA game on Steam.
So I have a question for the group. I'm kind of watching this over here, and Chris, you and I may be able to relate to this a little bit more. So we go back from the early days, interactive, whatever that means, and then you kind of go forward to the games and the graphics and everything starts to get faster, better, you know, whatever case may be. Then we start to get the Twitter world and the social in here, and then you start working yet more graphics, bigger companies, the Paramounts and all those guys getting into this. So my question to the group is, if you're down to the blogs where you have to hold your content for one day to put it up to the next so it's all fresh, and everything has to be fresh and new and whatever that is. So how do you take this conglomerate of things that you have here, which I assume you guys are the indies of the world, you do this for the love of the game and everything like that. Then you have the Paramounts delivering it, or the Sony's delivering stuff because they need to make $838 million, and Wall Street wants to make all this work. If you notice today, I noticed today in GameStop that they have joined together with a company to develop their own content. So they're going to develop their own content and sell it directly through GameStop, and just kind of like Walmart was doing with the Eagles records and all that kind of stuff. But so my question to you guys is, under the guise of the latest, greatest computers, dollars, censorships, freshness, all that kind of stuff, where are we going?
Big question.
I think it's and this is probably like the common trend among all of us here that we've been talking about, is it's the personal connection with the player of the game. So like we're indies, so if someone comments on our Facebook page or Twitter, we can personally talk to that person. They've got, you know, their small YouTube channel, they can make real friends on their channel. Chris has like a podcast, so he can, on Twitter, you know, talk to his listeners like that, and that's how we build our communities. Giant Sony or like Rockstar making Grand Theft Auto, the developers can't really talk to the fans at those big places.
And a lot of times they're kind of barred from talking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's a bunch of legal
At
stuff.
Rockstar, yeah.
You're not. Yeah, you're not allowed to even admit that you worked on the game, probably. But
Very protective.
so that's the value that we have, and it's what lets us compete with the giants of the world, I guess. That's my opinion.
I was gonna say, I mean, there's something neat about doing like indie games, but if we were trying to like hunt down the most views and the hashtags that are trending, hopping on newer games would be the way to try to generate more traffic. But I think what's going to happen with, I mean, this is just a guess, but I think AAAs will be around, Steam games will be around, indie games will be around, mobile games will be around. I think they're kind of growing in their own bubbles. And there's some crossover, like Nintendo's trying to get into the mobile phone market a little bit, but I feel like each is kind of growing their own platforms for distribution. So AAA is kind of a separate entity from the way indie games are developed. I feel like they're just so far apart from each other that I don't know what the impact between indie production and big AAA production is, but I feel like they've kind of become their own driving forces.
I mean, I guess I feel like everyone's facing the same problem, like the complaining or whatever I was doing earlier about the economy of journalism. It's not any different from what I see indie designers complaining about or app creators complaining about. I mean, we live in a network economy with big winners and and those people reap enormous rewards, and there's first mover advantage and a network effect and all those things. And but within that, just because you're not, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, or Microsoft, doesn't mean there isn't room to burrow underneath them and have a smaller, different kind of success. And that's partly what I was asking for culturally when I was saying, I think the cultural barons need to come up with a different measurement of success for video games. That like just because something's done Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto scale economic success doesn't mean that it shouldn't be regarded as something that you ought to be knowledgeable about. Whether it was Flower when it came out or whatever, maybe it was Undertale, maybe it was something else. But there are these games that I just hope we get to a point where to be regarded as a civilized person, and a cultured person, you ought to know about this. I'm not saying you had to read Julian Barnes' A Sense of an Ending, but you ought to know that it was published and that what it was basically about, and that people are talking about it, or Carol, a movie that makes $10 million but dominates the cultural media because it's regarded as extraordinary. Games deserve that kind of treatment too. And if we, but on an economic scale, I think, certainly in blog land, what you saw was a few really big winners, the Gawker Medias of the world. But then you have people who make a more modest living selling newsletters, email newsletters, and I think podcasts will shake out that way. I'm sure YouTube Let's Players shake out that way. So, but it does require, entrepreneurialism and less of a safety net than you have in a different model.
All right. We kind of have to wrap up. We're coming up on 4 o'clock. I'll say that a lot of us will be here later tonight, and you should come too. Global Game Jam. We will start things off at 6 o'clock with Chris's keynote, where we will talk a little bit more about media and games. You can come and you can make a game in 48 hours. Regardless of your skill set, then there's probably a place where you'll be greatly needed in some team, because it is a team-based jam. And I'll also say that it's been really fun talking with you guys. All of these folks' information, Twitter, websites, and stuff are on our Facebook event page for this event. What is it? It's Video Games and Media Panel. Go look up there. It has all their information. You can connect with these guys and stay connected, become part of an interesting community online.
I'll throw in that I put some cards over there too if anyone's interested.
All right, yeah. Okay, thanks for coming. Thanks for all of our panelists.
Thanks to Will and Lauren from RVA.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, it was neat. I swear I had a question. I was like, oh, this is going to be a good question for the panel. And then
I was trying to think of something to myself.
I know that I had one. I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. It was really for the designers. Then I was trying to beat that. So
Yeah.
I forgot it.
It's cool. Spent 40 hours
It's fun.
on that. Nice question.
You hungry?